You are welcome. Today's lecture is on the subphylum Vertebrata or Craniata and the phylum Chordata. Earlier, we had discussed about the chordates, and that chordates are the pterostome coelomates of the phylum Chordata in the kingdom Animalia that are characterized by the possession of a postanal tail, a dorsal hollow nerve cord, a notochord, and endostyle. Animals that possess these four major features are referred to as chordates. And we also classified chordates into three subphyla. The subphylum Urochordata, that's basically represented by the tunicates. The subphylum Cephalochordata, that consists of the amphioxus, and the subphylum Vertebrata. So this lecture is on the subphylum Vertebrata, the introductory part of the subphylum Vertebrata, or the vertebrates. Now, the vertebrates, what are vertebrates? Basically, the vertebrates are chordates with a spinal or vertebrate column or backbone. All chordates that possess a backbone or a vertebral column are referred to as the vertebrates. The subphylum is also referred to as the subphylum Craniata. Just as the name implies, the word Craniata is derived from cranium. So vertebrates, unlike the cephalochordates and the urochordates that do not have a brain that's encased by a skull or with a skull, the vertebrates have a brain that's enclosed by the skull. So the cranium gives this group its name, this subphylum, its name Craniata. So apart from having a vertebral column, they also possess a skull that encloses the brain. So all organisms that have backbone or a vertebral column are referred to as vertebrates. Okay, the name comes from individual bony or cartilaginous segments called vertebrae that make up the spine. Now, vertebrates differ from the tunicates in having the following features. One, they have a vertebral column. In all vertebrates, the notochord is replaced by a vertebral column during embryonic development. So the vertebrates, unlike the tunicates, unlike the amphioxus in the subphylum Cephalochordata, the vertebrates possess a vertebral column. The vertebrates also have a head. Vertebrates have a distinct and well-differentiated head, and that has well-developed sensory organs. The head is distinct. Okay, the cephalochordates, for instance, do not have a distinct head. The head is really not well developed, and the brain is not even well developed. It's in the form of a ganglion, and it's not enclosed between by the brain is not enclosed by a cranium. But in vertebrates, the head is distinct, it's well differentiated, and have well developed sensory organs like the eyes, the nose, the ears, the mouth that has a tongue for tasting food and other things. It's not as it is in lower vertebrates. The head is well developed. The brain of vertebrates is encased within the skull or the cranium. And the skull is made up of bone or cartilage. Now, this is a figure that shows the features, the very distinctive features of vertebrates. Now, in the fish, the cow, the crocodile, and the bird, you see that these organisms have backbones, okay? They have vertebral column. And the brain is enclosed within a skull, just as it is in all the vertebral groups. The backbone that also have this vertebral column, the backbone, each of these vertebrate groups gives them it classifies them into this subphylum Vertebrata or Craniata because of the skull they have that encloses the brain of the organisms in this group. In addition to these two key characteristics, vertebrates differ from other chordates in other important aspects. One of the important aspects that the vertebrates differ from other chordates is the fact that they possess what we call the neural crest. The neural crest basically refers to a group of embryonic cells known as the neural crest, and they contribute to the development of many embryonic structures. The neural crest creates a transient embryonic structure in vertebrates that gives rise to most of the peripheral nervous system and to several non-neural cell types, including smooth muscle cells of the cardiovascular system, pigment cells in the skin, and craniofacial bones, cartilage, and connective tissues. So the neural crest gives rise to cells of the peripheral nervous system, basically the neurons, especially the motor, for instance, the motor neurons, the accessory neurons, and the association neurons. And they also give rise to the smooth muscle cells of the cardiovascular system, the smooth muscles of the heart. They also give rise, the neural cells give rise to the pigments in the skin and the craniofacial bones, the bones in our face that are attached to the skull, the cartilage, and also to connective tissues. The neural crest cells give rise to this. Vertebrates have an endoskeleton. The endoskeleton of vertebrates distinguishes them from other groups. Okay, the tunicates in the subphylum Cephalochordata have exoskeleton, just as we saw earlier. They have a tunic, but vertebrates have an endoskeleton. Even if some other chordate groups like the cephalochordates and some other urochordates have endoskeleton, the endoskeleton is not made up of cartilage or bone. It's made up of notochord, which that's one major distinctive feature of vertebrates. The internal organs of vertebrates make them to be more advanced than those of other vertebrates. The internal organs that characterize vertebrates include the kidneys, the liver, and endocrine glands, such as the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the thyroid, the parathyroid, the adrenals, the pineal body, the ovaries, and the testes. So the vertebrates have internal organs that are not found or that are not well developed in other chordate groups like the urochordates and the cephalochordates. They have kidneys, they have liver, and endocrine glands. The ductless endocrine glands secrete hormones that help regulate many of the body functions of vertebrates. All vertebrates have a heart and a closed circulatory system. That's one other feature. They have a heart and a closed circulatory system. The heart is well developed in vertebrates. In fishes, the heart is two-chambered. In amphibians, as in the juvenile, the tadpoles possess two-chambered hearts, while the adults possess three-chambered hearts. The reptiles possess a three-chambered heart, except the crocodilian, the crocodiles that possess four-chambered hearts. And the birds possess four-chambered hearts. The mammals possess four-chambered hearts. The vertebrates also possess a closed circulatory system. Now, what is a closed circulatory system? A closed circulatory system basically means a circulatory system in which the blood flows within closed vessels like the arteries, veins, and the capillaries. In both their circulatory and excretory functions, vertebrates differ markedly from other animals. Okay, they have well-developed circulatory and excretory systems distinct from other animals. Now, this is a figure that helps us to appreciate the general characteristics of vertebrates. The general characteristics of vertebrates. Now, we have mentioned that vertebrates have a vertebral column. Now, the vertebral column, the backbone, is made up of bones or cartilage. The bone is made up of bones or cartilage. So in vertebrates, the notochord differentiates to form the vertebral column that's made up of bones or cartilage. Then they also possess a head, a well-developed head with brain. And the brain also have endocrine glands, also have endocrine glands like the pituitary gland and others. And the brain is also enclosed within its core. That gives it its name Craniata. Like we said earlier, the subphylum is called Subphylum Vertebrata because it has a vertebral column. It has backbone. Then it's also called Craniata because it has a cranium. The brain is encased in the skull. So they have Craniata, and they are called Craniata. The vertebrates, the head of the vertebrates have other sensory organs like the eyes, the ears, the mouth, and the nostrils for perceiving smell. And they also have well-developed internal organs like the liver, the kidney, and they also have a heart and a closed circulatory system. The heart pumps blood through vessels, the arteries, and the veins, okay? And depending on the class of the vertebrates, the number of chambers differ, as we have discussed earlier. Now, I want to look at the general vertebrate body plan. The general vertebrate body plan. First, we want to look at regional differentiation. The typical vertebrate body has three regions: the head, the trunk, and the tail. The body of the vertebrates have three regions: the head, the trunk, and the tail. So the body of vertebrates is divided into three parts: head, trunk, and tail. But there are some vertebrates, many vertebrates have a neck, okay? Except the fish that lack neck. The amphibians, the reptiles, the birds, and the mammals all have neck in addition to these three body parts. Okay. Now here is a figure that helps us to look at the distinct regions of the body of vertebrates. Like we said earlier, the body of vertebrates is divided into three major parts: the head, trunk, and tail. The body of vertebrates is divided into three major parts: the head, the trunk, and the tail. And some vertebrates, like you can see in this reptile, have necks. So in such vertebrates, you have the head, the neck, the trunk, and the tail. So that's about regional differentiation in vertebrates. Vertebrates also possess bilateral symmetry. What's bilateral symmetry? A bilateral symmetry basically refers to a kind of body plan in which the body can actually be divided into two identical halves. Okay, as you can see in this figure, the turtle or the tortoise can be cut into two halves having mirror images. So they have a bilateral symmetry. Vertebrates also exhibit segmentation or metamerism. Metamerism basically refers to serial repetition of structures along the long axis of the body, okay, along the long axis of the body. And vertebrates though the metamerism in vertebrates is different from that of other lower animals like the earthworm. Okay, the earthworm's metamerism is on the surface, and the earthworms, the metamerism and the amphioxus in the subphylum Cephalochordata is also in the surface and even in adults, but in that of vertebrates, it's evident in the embryo. Metamerism is seen in the embryo. Metamerism is also present in the adult body to a varying degree. For instance, the muscle segments of fishes, okay? The muscle segment of the fishes also exhibit metamerism. Then the rectus abdominis, in humans, that is the large intestine of humans also exhibit metamerism. Then the ribs. Now, this figure helps us to look at metamerism in the embryo of the vertebrates. Vertebrates exhibit segmentation around the gill slits and the dorsal part of the embryo. The dorsal part of the embryo exhibits metamerism. Metamerism can be seen around the ribs of vertebrates. Metamerism can be noticed in the ribs and also in the muscle units of fishes. Now, vertebrates also possess a notochord. Now, the notochord is a cartilaginous rod that defines the long axis of the embryo. The notochord is the first skeletal feature to appear in the embryo of vertebrates. It is located immediately ventral to the developing nerve cord and superior to the digestive tube. Most fishes lose their notochord in their adult. The fishes usually retain the notochord sometimes in their adult form. Some amphibians will show a pattern similar to the one seen in fish. In reptiles, birds, and mammals, the notochord is almost or completely lost. In reptiles, birds, and mammals, the notochord is almost or completely lost. The dorsal hollow nerve cord in vertebrates is dorsally oriented and hollow. It consists of the brain and the spinal cord. The dorsal hollow nerve cord differentiates to form the brain and the spinal cord in vertebrates. Vertebrates also possess a pharynx. The pharynx is a vital portion of the vertebrate embryo. It produces a number of structures such as gills in fishes, lungs in tetrapods, jaw, skeleton, and musculature, some endocrine glands, the middle ear in tetrapods, and serves as a source of stem cells in human fetus. As a result, all vertebrate embryos will show a basic pharyngeal architecture. So the pharynx is very important. It gives rise to the structures such as gills in the fish, lungs in tetrapods, then jaw, skeleton, and musculature, endocrine glands, the middle ear, tetrapods, and serves as a source of immune stem cells in human fetus. Vertebrates also exhibit a tube within a tube body plan. Vertebrates and many invertebrates, for that matter, have a tube within a tube body plan. It's like having a biro and the pad that's containing the ink. Now, the outer tube of vertebrates is the body wall, while the inner tube is the digestive tract. So the digestive tract is the long tube that runs from the mouth to the anus that's been covered by the rest of the coelom that has the body wall. The space between the outer and inner tubes, between the body wall and the digestive tract, is called the coelom or the body cavity. Now, the coelom of reptiles, of the fish, amphibians, and reptiles can be divided into the pericardial cavity, which houses the heart, and the pleuroperitoneal cavity, which houses the rest of the viscera. Okay, in fish, amphibians, and reptiles, the cilium is divided into two parts: the pericardial cavity and the pleuroperitoneal cavity. The pericardial cavity houses the heart, while the pleuroperitoneal cavity houses the rest of the viscera, the rest of the body organs. Okay, it houses the intestines, it houses the liver, it houses the stomach, it houses the other parts of the viscera. In tetrapods, the lungs are located in the pleuroperitoneal cavity. The pleuroperitoneal cavity and pericardial cavities reseparate by a partition named the transverse septum in tetrapods. Now here is a figure that's showing the cilium of a fish. Just as we have mentioned earlier, the cilium of the fish, amphibians, and reptiles is divided into two major cavities: the pericardial cavity, okay, that's around here. Okay, it houses the heart. This is the pericardial cavity. Then the pleural peritoneal cavity here accommodates the swim bladder, it accommodates the stomach, it accommodates the liver, it accommodates the intestines, the urinary bladder, and others. So the two cavities, pericardial cavity and the pleuroperitoneal cavities in fishes, are the two major cavities. Now, the cilium, or the body cavity of birds and mammals, is divided into two parts. The cilium of birds and mammals is divided into two parts. It's divided into the thoracic cavity and the abdominopelvic cavity. The cilium of birds and mammals is divided into two parts: the thoracic cavity and the abdominopelvic cavity. Now, the thoracic cavity basically is also divided into two parts. It has the pericardial cavity and the pleural cavities, a pair of pleural cavities. Now, the pericardial cavity accommodates the heart, while the pleural cavity accommodates the lungs. And some, there will also be the mediastinal cavity. The second cavity, major cavity, is the abdominopelvic cavity. Now, the abdominopelvic cavity is further divided into two. It has the abdominal, or the peritoneal cavity, and the pelvic cavity. The abdominal cavity is from the chest down from the ribs to the hip area around the hips, while the pelvic cavity is that region around the hips of the vertebrate. The cilium is totally unsheathed in a series of serous membranes. Now here is a figure that's showing the cavities of vertebrates. Now here, the chest region is referred to as the thoracic cavity. This chest region is referred to as the thoracic cavity. Now, the thoracic cavity is divided also into the pleural cavity, a pair of pleural cavities that accommodates the lungs, a pair of pleural cavities, and the pericardial cavity that accommodates the heart. Then we also have the mediastinal, this region, okay, it's also another cavity in some. Particularly in humans, we have the mediastinal cavity. Okay, then the second major cavity is the abdominopelvic cavity. Here, the abdominopelvic cavity is further divided into two parts. It has the abdominal cavity, or it's also called the peritoneal cavity. And we have the pelvic cavity. The abdominal cavity ranges from this region around the ribs, okay, down to the hips, while the pelvic cavity is the region around the hips, the coelom, the body cavity around the hips. Yeah, humans also have another additional cavity that is called the cranial cavity. The cranial cavity that accommodates the brain, okay, that's within the skull that accommodates the brain is also called the cranial cavity. They also have what we call the vertebral cavity, the space in between the bones that accommodates the spinal cord. Now, other vertebrate features. Now, vertebrates, the integument of vertebrate is composed of the skin and the hypodermis. The skin is composed of the epidermis and the dermis. Now, the dermis of the vertebrates, the epidermis is a superficial layer composed of many layered epithelium having a number of functions. It produces a variety of glands, 7 variety of functions. It produces conified appendages such as hair, feathers, and scales. So one basic feature of vertebrates integumentary system is that they have integumentary structures such as hair, feathers, and scales. Particularly among the fish, you have scales. Among the amphibians, some are scaleless, some have very minute scales or folds. Then among the reptiles, you have dry scales or scutes, and among the birds, feathers are the integumentary structures. Then in mammals, we have hairs that form integumentary structures. We have mammals that have integumentary structures. Now, we want to look at the respiratory structures in humans. Humans have complex respiratory structures, such as the nostrils, the trachea, and the lungs. The lungs differentiated into alveoli, and which from where the oxygen diffuses into the blood and is transported to the cells for oxidative metabolism. The vertebrate's digestive system is also a complete digestive system with accessory organs like the liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder. It's well developed with specified digestive enzymes that help to break down food. Vertebrates also possess a urogenital system. The urogenital system basically refers to a situation where the reproductive system is connected to the urinary system or the excretory system, just as it is. The penis that's used for sexual intercourse is also used to urinate or to pass out urine in humans. So the reproductive system is linked to the excretory system. The reproductive system is linked to the excretory system. Vertebrates have a closed circulatory system. They have a closed circulatory system, and they possess endoskeleton that's made up of bone or cartilage. Now I want to look at classification of vertebrates. Classification of vertebrates. Now, vertebrates are classified into 2 superclasses based on the presence or absence of jaws. Vertebrates are classified into 2 superclasses based on the presence or absence of jaws. The vertebrates that possess jaws belong to the superclass Agnatostomata, while the vertebrates that lack jaws are classified into the superclass Agnatostomata or agnatha. Gnatostomata encompasses all jawed vertebrates belonging to the class Sarcopterygi, Actinopterygi, Chondrichthyes, Amphibia, Reptilia, Mammalia. So the fishes in the class Sarcopterygi, which are lobe-finned fishes, the fishes in the class Actinopterygi, that are ray-finned fishes, the fishes in the class Chondrichthyes, which consists of the sharks, rays, and skates, the class Amphibia, which consists of the amphibians such as frogs, toads, and salamanders, and the class Reptilia, which has lizards, snakes, and tortoises, and the aves, the birds, and the mammals all belong to the superclass Gnatostomata. The superclass Agnatostomata consists of vertebrates that lack jaws, and two extant classes belong to this superclass, though we have some extinct classes too. Okay, but we'll concentrate on the extant groups. The extant groups are the lampreys in the class Cephalospidomorphi, and the hagfishes in the class Myxini. Okay, now, although there are only two extant groups today, there are a large number of extinct agnathans called ostracoderms. Now, ostracoderms are a group of armored fish-like organisms, but they have gone into extinction. So thank you very much for watching. Our next video will be on the jawless vertebrates, those in the superclass Agnatostomata. Those in the superclass Agnatostomata. We'll look at those in the class Myxini and the class Cephalospidomorphi. That's the hagfishes and the lampreys. Thanks for watching. See you soon.